Ethan sat at the corner of the kitchen table, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug. He watched as Claire moved around the room, humming softly to herself while preparing breakfast. For years, he had admired her from a distance, quietly hoping that one day she would notice him not as a stepson, but as something more. Every glance, every laugh she shared with him felt like a small spark in his chest. Yet he kept it all inside, burying his feelings beneath polite smiles and casual conversation. He didn't want to risk what little closeness they had, but today was different. There was something in the air, something heavier, like the quiet before a storm. Ethan's heart raced, and he realized he couldn't stay silent forever. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about that summer when everything had seemed simpler. He remembered the first time he had truly noticed Claire not just as his stepmother, but as someone remarkable in her own right. It was a sunny afternoon, and the house was quiet. He had wandered into the backyard carrying a book he had promised himself he would finish that day. Claire was there too, tending to her small garden with careful hands. "Hey, Ethan," she had said without looking up. Her voice was soft, warm, like sunlight spilling into a shaded corner. "Do you want to help me with these?" He had hesitated, unsure if she wanted him there, but he nodded. Together, they planted rows of flowers and vegetables, laughing at the dirt that stubbornly clung to their shoes. That day, for the first time, Ethan felt a genuine connection with her. It wasn't just admiration, it was a feeling that reached deeper than he could understand at the time. Over the years, those small moments multiplied. Rainy afternoons spent inside building puzzles together, or cooking simple dinners that always ended with flour on their hands and giggles that filled the kitchen. Movie nights on the couch where they shared blankets and jokes. And Ethan secretly treasured the way Claire's eyes lit up when she laughed. And yet, even with all these moments, there had always been something unsaid. A line Ethan never dared to cross. The bond they shared was strong, but it existed within boundaries he had promised himself he wouldn't challenge. He admired her from a distance, quietly and carefully, afraid that revealing his feelings might shatter what they already had. One evening, he remembered a particular moment that had stayed with him over the years. The family had gone on a small camping trip near the lake. That night, the stars had been brilliant, stretching endlessly across the sky. Ethan had found Claire sitting by the fire, staring at the reflections in the water. "You know," she had said softly, "sometimes it feels like we're all just tiny lights, trying to find our place in the dark." Ethan had sat beside her, his heart quietly aching. I think he had whispered that maybe the lights aren't lost at all, they just shine differently for everyone. Claire had smiled, and for a brief moment, he felt as though she understood something unspoken. That night, they had talked for hours about dreams, regrets, hopes, but never about the feelings that Ethan had buried deep inside himself. That was the first time he realized that his admiration for her had grown into something more complicated. Something tender and consuming, though he didn't yet have words for it, as he thought back to that night. Ethan realized it was the shared silences that had defined their bond as much as the laughter. Quiet mornings when Claire would make tea and sit across from him, talking about her day while he listened, sometimes offering advice, sometimes just soaking in her presence. It was in those small, consistent gestures that trust had formed, and with it, an unspoken closeness that felt as solid as any family tie. Still, he had held back. What had kept him from speaking up? Fear, certainly. Fear that his feelings might make things awkward or break the fragile balance they had built. He had also feared misunderstanding, the thought that she might see him differently, that the warmth in her smile might fade. So he had chosen silence, masking his emotions behind polite conversations and lighthearted teasing, even as the longing inside him grew. And Claire, Ethan knew, had her own moments of quiet hesitation. She had often lingered just a little longer in the kitchen when he came home from school, or paused with a thoughtful expression while he talked about his day. There were glances that lingered too long, smiles that seemed heavier than mere kindness. Ethan had sometimes wondered if she sensed the depth of his feelings, though she had never mentioned them. It was these memories, the tiny, tender fragments of shared life that bound them together. Ethan's heart ached with nostalgia as he recalled them, but it also filled him with hope. Hope that the foundation of trust and closeness they had built over the years could withstand honesty, that perhaps the bond they shared could grow into something even deeper. Now, standing in the garden as Claire moved among the flowers, Ethan felt the past pressing gently against the present. He could almost hear the echoes of those quiet evenings of shared laughter, of moments spent in simple companionship. Every memory whispered that their connection was real, meaningful, and worth the courage it would take to speak his heart. For the first time in years, he realized he was ready. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but with a careful, deliberate understanding of what they had and what he hoped it could become. And yet, the fear of changing everything still lingered, a shadow over the bright warmth of his memories. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of longing in his chest. The past had shaped the present, and now it was guiding him toward a truth he could no longer hide. Claire deserved honesty, and he deserved a chance to let her know the depth of his feelings. No matter how uncertain the future might be. And as he watched her hum softly in the garden, brushing soil from her hands, he felt a quiet certainty. The moments they had shared, the bond they had built over the years were not just memories. They were the beginning of something beautiful, something worth taking a leap of faith for. The autumn wind carried a crisp chill as Ethan walked down the familiar streets of his hometown. Leaves tumbled across the sidewalks, spinning in shades of gold and amber. And the scent of earth and rain hung softly in the air. He had returned for the weekend, a brief escape from the busyness of his own life. And the thought of seeing Claire again made his chest tighten with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He hadn't planned to run into her. Life had its routines, and so did she. But fate seemed to have other ideas. As he turned the corner near the little cafe where they used to spend long afternoons laughing over hot chocolate, he saw Claire standing beneath the awning, her hair catching the light of the fading sun. For a moment, the world shrank around him. Every memory, every shared laugh from the past, seemed to press into the present, filling the space between them with unspoken words. She looked up as if sensing him, and their eyes met. A soft smile tugged at her lips. "Ethan," she said, her voice gentle but steady. He nodded, swallowing hard. "Claire, I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," she admitted, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. There was a quiet pause, heavy with the weight of years, of things left unsaid. "It's been a while." "Yes," he said softly. "Too long. A small coincidence, a shared weekend." A brief overlap in schedules had brought them back to this street, back to each other. And now, standing under the soft glow of the autumn afternoon, Ethan felt the old spark stir, stronger than he had remembered. They decided to walk together, slowly through the streets lined with shops and cafes. The conversation began cautiously, touching on everyday matters, whether local news, mutual friends, but underneath it all, an undercurrent of emotion flowed freely, unspoken yet palpable. Each laugh, each glance seemed to carry more meaning than the simple words could convey. At one point, it paused in front of the park where Ethan had spent countless afternoons as a teenager. He remembered how Claire had once sat beside him on the swings, talking about hopes and dreams. The quiet intimacy of shared stories forming a bond neither of them had yet fully understood. "I remember this place," Ethan said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "We used to come here when things felt simpler." Claire smiled, eyes distant for a moment as she recalled the past. "Yes," she said softly. "It always felt like time slowed down here, like we had a little world of our own." Their steps continued, and the conversation drifted naturally toward lighter topics. Yet every small detail, the way her scarf brushed against his arm, the warmth in her smile, the gentle tilt of her head reminded Ethan why he had kept his feelings buried for so long then. Without warning, a gust of wind blew a stack of papers from a nearby street artist's stand. Ethan reached instinctively to help Claire catch one that fluttered toward her, and their hands brushed. The contact was brief, accidental, yet it sent a jolt of electricity through him, a reminder of the deep longing he had carried for years. Claire laughed softly, looking down at their touching hands before pulling back slightly. Seems like even the wind wants to remind us of old habits, she teased lightly. Her eyes sparkling with warmth, Ethan smiled, heart racing. Old habits, he repeated, as if testing the words aloud. He wanted so badly to tell her that his feelings had never faded, that every moment apart had only strengthened the bond he felt with her. But still, he held back, savoring the moment and letting it speak for him. They eventually found themselves on a quiet bench, overlooking the small lake at the center of the park. The water reflected the colors of the sky, a gentle palette of orange, pink, and purple. For a long while, they simply sat side by side, letting the peacefulness of the evening fill the space between them. It feels strange, Claire said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. Seeing you again like this, it's like no time has passed and yet everything is different. Ethan nodded, feeling the same conflicting emotions. I know. I've thought about moments like this for years, hoping for a chance to just be honest. His voice caught slightly, but he forced himself to continue. I guess fate gave us a little nudge today. Claire's gaze softened, and she reached out, resting her hand gently on his. Maybe it did, she whispered. Maybe this is the moment we've both been waiting for without even realizing it. Ethan's heart swelled. There was no need for declarations yet, no need for promises he wasn't ready to make. The moment itself, the presence of her hand in his and the shared warmth of their history was enough. It reminded him that the bond they had built over years of laughter, memories, and unspoken understanding was still alive as the sun dipped lower behind the trees. Painting the lake in golden rose, Ethan realized that the past had never really left them. It had been waiting quietly to guide them back to each other. And now, standing in the present, he understood that the next step, finally speaking the truth, was closer than ever. He didn't know exactly what the future held. But in that golden moment, with Claire's hand in his and the wind whispering through the leaves, he knew one thing for certain: the connection they shared, nurtured over years of closeness and quiet longing, was far too precious to leave unspoken any longer. Part 4, The Unspoken Truth. The evening air had a gentle chill as Ethan and Claire continued their walk through the quiet streets, their footsteps soft against the cobblestones. Streetlights flickered to life, casting pools of golden light on the sidewalks. There was a comfortable silence between them, one filled with memories, emotions, and words neither had yet dared to say aloud. Ethan's mind raced with thoughts he had carried for years. Every glance, every small touch, every laugh they had shared seemed to press insistently against the surface of his heart. He wanted to tell her everything about the longing that had never faded, the moments he had treasured, and the silent fear of losing her that had kept him quiet. But every time he opened his mouth, the words faltered, and hesitation held him back. Claire seemed equally aware of the tension. Her eyes, bright in the soft glow of the streetlights, lingered on him longer than necessary. A gentle furrow in her brow betrayed the conflict she was feeling, an unspoken struggle between wanting to reach out and fear of changing everything. She had sensed Ethan's feelings for years, and though she had never spoken them, they had influenced her every gesture, every smile, every lingering glance. They stopped in front of a small bookstore, the display window lit with warm light. Ethan could see the reflection of his own nervous expression in the glass, and he realized how long he had been holding back, not just from Claire, but from himself. I've thought about this moment, he began, voice low and unsteady, more times than I can count. And I've always wondered what it would feel like if I finally said what I feel. Claire's hand brushed against his lightly, a touch that sent a flutter through his chest. She looked away for a moment, then back at him, eyes soft but searching. Ethan, I've felt it too, she admitted quietly. More than I realized, more than I even wanted to admit. The words hung between them, delicate and fragile. Neither of them moved, afraid to shatter the fragile truths now spoken. The night seemed to stretch, filled with the weight of years of silent longing. Ethan's heart pounded as he searched her expression, looking for reassurance, for permission, for a sign that she felt the same depth of connection he did. I've been scared, Ethan confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Scared that if I said anything, it might ruin us. Ruin what we have. Claire shook her head gently, a faint smile tugging at her lips. You could never ruin us, she said softly. Everything we've shared, the laughter, the quiet moments, the memories, they're part of who we are. And part of me has always hoped you'd say something. Ethan felt a swell of emotion he could barely contain. Relief, joy, longing, and fear all collided in his chest. He took a careful step closer, still maintaining the respectful distance he had always honored. It's just hard, to admit it after all this time, to risk everything for something that might only exist in my heart. Claire reached out, placing her hand lightly over his. Sometimes the things that feel the hardest to say are the most important, she whispered. And I think maybe we've waited for this moment for a reason. Ethan's eyes softened, his throat tight with emotion. I don't want to rush you, he said earnestly. I just needed you to know. Even if it changes nothing, even if it's just a small step, I couldn't keep it inside anymore. Claire's gaze held his, steady and tender. She squeezed his hand gently. A silent promise of understanding. It doesn't change nothing, she said. It changes everything. The truth is, I've felt this way too. And hearing you say eat it makes me feel like maybe it's finally okay to hope. They stood together under the soft glow of the streetlights, the city quiet around them, and for the first time in years, the unspoken truth between them no longer remained hidden. Ethan felt the tension in his chest ease slightly, replaced by a warmth he had only imagined before. Claire's presence beside him, her hand in his, and the mutual acknowledgement of their feelings made the world feel suddenly bright, as though the years of waiting had all led to this exact moment. I think Ethan said after a long pause, voice steady now, that maybe we've been holding back for so long because we didn't know how precious this is. How rare a connection like ours really is. Claire nodded, her eyes glimmering in the late afternoon sun cast a warm golden glow over the small-town park where Ethan and Claire had decided to meet. The trees swayed gently, leaves whispering in the soft breeze. And the distant laughter of children playing reminded them of countless afternoons they had shared together over the years. There was a sense of quiet urgency in the unspoken need for clarity, a desire for truth finally to be spoken. Ethan had spent the entire morning rehearsing the words he had carried for so long. But as he saw Claire approaching, her familiar smile lighting up her face, he realized that no preparation could match the weight of the moment. Every step she took brought memories flooding back, the quiet evenings, the shared jokes, the countless times he had admired her from afar, and the secret longing he had kept locked away in his heart. Claire greeted him with a soft, warm hey, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. There was a pause, just long enough for both of them to sense the tension and the anticipation. Ethan took a deep breath. Claire, he began, his voice low but steady. I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago. Her eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent, giving him the space to continue. There was a gentleness in her gaze that encouraged him to speak the truth he had carried for years. I've always felt something for you, Ethan admitted, his hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together. More than just admiration. More than I even understood myself at first. And for so long, I kept it inside because I was afraid of changing what we have, afraid of losing you if I spoke the truth. Claire's expression softened, and she reached out to touch his arm lightly. Ethan, she whispered, I had no idea you felt that strongly. His chest tightened. I wanted to tell you so many times. Every day I thought about it. Every time we laughed, every moment we shared, I felt it growing stronger. And today, I realized I can't keep it a secret any longer. I need you to know, even if it's just for me to finally be honest. Claire looked down for a moment, her hand still resting on his arm, and then she lifted her eyes to meet his again. I think I've felt it too, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I've felt it in small ways, in moments that I couldn't quite understand at the time. and hearing you say it. It makes everything make sense." Ethan felt a surge of relief and hope. The fear that had gripped him for years began to lift, replaced by a quiet, steady warmth. "You? You mean that?" he asked, his voice full of wonder and disbelief. "Yes," Claire said, a gentle smile spreading across her face. "All this time, I've wondered if we were imagining the connection, if I was misreading my own feelings. But now I know it's real. And I think, maybe, it's been real for both of us all along." For a long moment, they simply stood together, letting the words settle between them. The wind rustled the trees above, carrying with it the quiet symphony of the park, the distant calls of birds, the laughter of children, the soft rustle of leaves. It was as if the world itself had paused to honor the moment of truth. The first time their unspoken emotions had been laid bare, Ethan stepped a little closer, careful to respect the space between them, yet wanting to bridge the distance that had kept them apart for so long. "I don't expect anything to change overnight," he said softly. "I just needed you to know how I feel. And I hope we can see where this leads, slowly, together." Claire's eyes glimmered with emotion. "I'd like that," she replied. "I don't want to rush anything either. But knowing that you feel the same way, it's more than I ever hoped for." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the park. Ethan and Claire remained side by side on the bench, the golden light reflecting in their eyes. Every laugh, every glance, every subtle touch now carried a new meaning, a new weight. It wasn't a dramatic declaration of love, but it was something deeper. A mutual understanding. A shared acknowledgement of the feelings that had been building for years. In that quiet, tender moment, Ethan realized that the turning point wasn't a grand gesture or a sudden event. It was simply honesty, the courage to speak what had been hidden, the willingness to risk vulnerability, and the willingness to trust that their bond could endure. And as he looked at Claire, he knew that this moment, fragile and perfect, marked the beginning of something they had both been waiting for, even if neither had admitted it aloud until now. They stayed there as the sky turned soft shades of pink and purple, the park slowly emptying around them. And in the silence, with their hearts finally unburdened, Ethan and Claire discovered a quiet joy that came not from certainty about the future, but from the courage to embrace the truth of the present. The turning point had arrived, not with fanfare, not with dramatic revelation, but with simple, heartfelt honesty. And for the first time in years, they felt that their connection, nurtured by time, trust, and countless shared moments, could now grow into something even more beautiful. The first snow of the season fell softly, blanketing the quiet town in a delicate layer of white. Ethan and Claire walked slowly along the familiar streets, their breaths forming tiny clouds in the crisp air. The world seemed hushed, as if holding its own breath to watch the ending of a story that had taken years to unfold. It had been weeks since their turning point in the park. In that time, their connection had grown stronger, not through grand gestures, but through the small, steady rhythms of everyday life. Morning coffees shared in warm kitchens, long walks through the neighborhood, laughter at trivial jokes, and quiet evenings spent side by side reading or watching the world outside their windows. Each moment, simple and unassuming, reinforced the bond that had finally been allowed to blossom. Ethan glanced at Claire, a soft smile tugging at his lips. Her eyes, bright and full of life, met his, and in that glance, he saw reflected the years of longing, the patience, and the trust that had brought them to this day. "It feels right, doesn't it?" he said, his voice gentle. Claire nodded, her hand brushing against his as they walked. "It does," she agreed. "After all this time, it feels like we've finally found the place we were meant to be, slowly, carefully, and together." They paused at the edge of a small frozen pond in the park, the ice catching the glow of nearby lanterns. Ethan leaned on the wooden railing, watching the gentle swirl of snowflakes. For a moment, the quiet seemed absolute, as if the world had slowed just for them. "I never thought I'd feel this way," Ethan admitted, his voice low. "Not in a way that felt safe, steady, real. And yet, here we are. Somehow, all those years of waiting weren't wasted." They led us here. Claire reached out, placing her hand on his shoulder. They weren't wasted, she echoed. Every moment of laughter, every silence, every memory. It all built this, us. Ethan turned to face her fully, the emotion he had carried for so long shining in his eyes. I was scared for years, he confessed, scared that speaking my truth would ruin what we had. But now I see that it was worth the wait, worth the patience, worth every quiet moment we shared without knowing what it might become. Claire smiled, warmth radiating from her as she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. And I was scared too, she admitted. Scared that my feelings weren't the same as yours. Scared that revealing them might change everything. But knowing that we both felt this way, it makes me believe in us even more. They stood together for a long while, hands intertwined, letting the winter air wrap around them like a gentle embrace. The snow continued to fall, soft and steady, covering the ground in a pristine white blanket, symbolic of the fresh beginning unfolding between them. Ethan gently took both of her hands in his, holding them as though he could somehow convey all the words his heart had been carrying. I don't know exactly what the future holds, he said quietly, but I do know that I want to face it with you. Whatever comes next. I want us to navigate it together, without fear, without hesitation. Claire's eyes glistened with unshed tears. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, of recognition that love had found its way to them through patience, trust, and honesty. I want that too, Ethan, she said softly. We've waited long enough. Now it's our time to move forward, together. A soft gust of wind stirred the snow, and Ethan and Claire laughed lightly, feeling the joy of the moment, unburdened by the weight of years of silence. It was a laugh full of lightness and relief, a laugh that celebrated the culmination of patience, longing, and quiet courage. As the evening deepened into night, they began to walk back toward the warm glow of the town lights, their steps synchronized, their hands still intertwined. The world around them was calm, peaceful, and full of quiet promise. Each step they took felt like a step into the next chapter of their story, a chapter built on trust, affection, and the deep knowledge of each other's hearts. Ethan glanced down at Claire and smiled. We've come a long way, he said. Claire squeezed his hand gently. We have. And somehow it feels like the journey was always worth it. Every memory, every moment of waiting. It led us here. The snow continued to fall, silent and steady, as if blessing the quiet, heartfelt resolution of a story that had been years in the making. And in that moment, Ethan and Claire knew that the love they had finally allowed to surface was not fleeting or fragile. It was steady, mature, and resilient, built on the foundation of shared history, trust, and